that which is sacred or religious, and that which is secular or anything other than. But our scripture tells us very clear. It says that all things were made through Christ. And it says that through Christ, all things were reconciled to God. All things. All. It's very clear. In other words, this means in plain English that everything and everyone in the world contains a spark of the divine. It means that everything you see, touch, smell, taste, feel, everything that is in your world and around you is sacred. All, says the Scriptures. And therefore, we're not called to reject our current culture by any means. We live in a culture. And since everything in it is sacred, that means that it is our job to re-narrate the story and to tell the story of the culture all around us with God in the midst of it. It is our job to tell the story of God. And so for this Advent Christmas season, we're exploring the Charles Dickens classic, A Christmas Carol. And we're making connections between the story of Ebenezer Scrooge and the story that we as Christians are telling all of our friends and our neighbors and our co-workers as to why we do what we do in the month of December. It's kind of strange this year the way the calendar felt. Christmas came quite quickly, didn't it? I mean, Christmas actually started in November. It was like you were just finishing that cold turkey sandwich and it was Advent. It came pretty quickly. And I hope you spent a beautiful Thanksgiving with family and friends, maybe some neighbors, maybe even some strangers in a restaurant, but you were gathered around a table and hopefully you had time to laugh. You had time to share some funny memories of the past and to say, oh, I remember when, and to swap stories about when perhaps you were younger or when someone else was younger and they had a memory. I have a memory of a holiday season when I was growing up. I don't quite know how old I was. It wasn't really part of my memory for that to be important. But I have older brothers and sisters, and they're much older. They actually have their own children when I was growing up, and so many of my holidays were spent at their houses with their children, who were my nieces and nephews. And so some of the holidays weren't as fun as I would have liked them to have been. But this holiday was especially memorable, because you see, I got the toy I had been asking for. You know, for some of you, it was called a video game, but it was way back when video games tended to be just lights and bells and whistles in a plastic box that sat on your lap. But this one was very special. It was called Derby Driving. Do we have a picture of that Derby? There it is. The digital Derby auto race. That was the video game of the future. It had a steering wheel and a little shift lever so you could go faster or slower. And right on the box it said, makes real racing noises. And that noise went like this. And it did it until you hit the car in front of you. And then you're and then you keep going. It was a ton of fun. Well, we started out in the family Oldsmobile, and we went going to my brother's house. And we were on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Any of you been on the Pennsylvania Turnpike? Well, when you get on the Turnpike, you know once you're there, right? There's no way to get off. Came upon an ice storm. All the cars were stopped dead on the turnpike. You couldn't even get out of your car because there was just a sheet of ice on the road and you would have slipped and fallen. So everyone was staying in their cars waiting. I don't know what we were waiting for. But I can tell you, I was in the backseat of that Oldsmobile. I was going to master this game. 3.5 hours later, I was having the time of my life. No nieces and nephews. I didn't have to worry about what I was wearing. I was in the backseat of that Oldsmobile playing with the one toy that I really wanted, and I was having the best holiday I could ever have. Now, my father bless his soul, if he was here, he'd probably tell you a different story. For 3.5 hours. Our memories can really play games with us, can't they? Our memories sometimes they're hard to trust. Our memories are often imperfect. Our memories are definitely one-sided. Our memories can be very deceptive to us. The same experience that's shared by a numerous number of people, each person has their own memory of that experience, and yet no one has the facts. I have another holiday that I remember as well. Did any of you watch the Lone Ranger TV show? Not for you little ones, but for, come on. You can admit it. It was the best show ever. Are you kidding me? Oh, I wanted nothing more than to be the Lone Ranger. And so for Christmas, guess what I got? We showed up. Not that one. The Lone Ranger smoking click pistol, silver, white pearl handle. I was going to be the Lone Ranger. Nothing better than to go out and fight crime like he did. But there was something I always wondered. He never actually shot someone. But he would take the butt end of the handle and he would knock the villain out by hitting him over the back of his neck, right? Let him out, they could arrest him, and everybody was good. Well, being a young man, I often wondered, does that really work? Does it really work when you hit somebody in the back of the head with the butt of the gun and they'll just pass out? And so my sister became the unwilling volunteer. Now, my sister will tell you that I was trying to kill her. And she will tell you that she went immediately to my parents and said, I needed to be, committed, I needed to get to the doctors, they needed to call the police, lock me up. I was just having fun being the Lone Ranger. Our memories can play tricks on us. Our memories can be hard to trust. Our memories are often imperfect and one-sided, and sometimes they are deceptive to us. As we gather together and we relive our memories around the table, and as we come and we share, we discover that they truly are incomplete when it comes to history. The inconsistencies that we find in our memories, they can cause us to get stuck in that past moment of our lives, much like we find Ebenezer Scrooge. See, we see our past one way, but God sees it a different way. Here at church, when we plan our worship series, and when we draft prayers, and when we draft the call to worship, for instance, on a Sunday morning, this subject often comes up. We ask ourselves, what about the person who didn't have that experience? What about the person who perhaps had a bad experience when it comes to the word family, or father, or hope, or childhood, or many of the other words that we use? We don't all come from the same memories. We're not able to draw from the same experience. Take Christmas, for example. The world tells us what Christmas is supposed to be like, doesn't it? And yet many people find Christmas very painful. They find the Christmas season to be a hard and difficult time. Christmas season brings all those memories of past mistakes and failures and even the losses that really harm our hearts. And all of those memories that we have, it collides with what the world tells us Christmas should be. The world places pressures upon us and expectations that Christmas is filled with cheer, but our memories are not. Pastor Matt Rawl, who wrote the book, The Redemption of Scrooge, he wrote this: sometimes our memory of how we think things are supposed to be might not be the best picture of what they should be. We often become very frustrated, don't we? We become frustrated and some depressed and angry, and at the very least disappointed when our picture of the way Christmas should be doesn't measure up. But in spite of all that, we have to remember that Christmas is the time of Christ. It's the birth of Jesus. It's the physical activity of God coming down here and being present with us in our lives. He then begins a journey. The journey begins with his birth. The journey towards our redemption. And in our redemption, God's grace for forgiveness is poured out. And that grace includes all of our past experiences. It includes all of our hurts and our disappointments and our failures. So no matter how you remember your past, Jesus sees your past very differently. He sees redemption. This same frustration that we have around Christmas about the way it should be, and the memories that were welling up, this anxiety that we feel over what Christmas should have been, that same anxiety applies to our daily lives 365 days of the year. We get stuck in the same feelings over past failures and disappointments. We concentrate on the loss of loved ones and missed opportunities in our lives. Somehow we think they don't measure up to some strange benchmark or some sort of standard that we follow. Our view of our past, it becomes all about not measuring up. But Jesus sees them differently. Jesus knows all of our faults and all of our failures. And Jesus still invites us on a journey with him. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 4, we learn of the story when Jesus comes to the Sea of Galilee. Now, I'd like to put into your mind the beach that you were at this summer. Perhaps it was Margate or Ventnor or Ocean City. You're on the beach, and there are some men in a boat, and they're right off there in the water, and they're doing their work. And along comes this man who walks along the shore. He yells out to the men out in the boat. He says, "Come, follow me." And in an instant they do. They drop their nets and their poles and their ties and all their ropes. They jump out of the boat and they go and they follow the man on the shore. Many times in Bible studies in church, we talk about the men in the boat. We talk about how amazing it was that they just dropped everything and they left. We talk about the sacrifices that they made. We talk about their father who was running the fishing business and all the guys just got up and left. We talk about the wives and the children who were left behind and the communities that were now missing them. But the amazing thing about this story is not that the men dropped their nets. The amazing thing about this story is not that they recognized it was Jesus walking on the shore. The amazing thing about this story is that Jesus saw something in those men that they didn't see in themselves. The Apostle Paul wrote in the second letter to Corinthians, "We live by faith and not by sight." Jesus walking along the shore, he doesn't see those men who they were at that time. He didn't see all their past mistakes and failures. He didn't analyze whether or not they had been doing all the work they needed to do up to that point. No, when Jesus saw them in that boat, he saw them for who they were called to become. Jesus saw their future, not their past. Jesus saw them not what they had done, but what they were going to do for God. Jesus doesn't call perfect people. He perfects those who are called. Amen. Accepting the invitation of Christ doesn't mean that we're going to be perfect now or even after we accept the invitation. But it does mean that through Christ we'll remember that we are redeemed. Christ will give up all of our past and even our present failures and transform us through his power of redemption. all so that we can accept who he is and what he has given us. And that is more love than we know what to do. And then we can respond. We can take that love, that cup that overflows, and we can share it with our neighbors. Brothers and sisters, we are not called to be perfect ever in this life. But we are perfectly suited to do the work of the Lord. We've been given a gift through which we respond to God's grace. Neither our past nor our present determines our future. Some of you may have heard the name Andrew Carnegie. Anybody familiar with that name? Andrew Carnegie. Steel, empire, magnet, wealth beyond wealth. He grew a steel industry not just powerful in the Americas, but throughout the world. And he devoted the whole second half of his life to giving all of that away. If you look around, there are numerous nonprofit charities that are named after him or in support because of him. Libraries and museums with his name on them exist all over the country. But his story is remarkably similar to Ebenezer Scrooge. Because you see, when Andrew Carnegie first began amassing his great wealth, he had two primary focuses in his life. One was to build as much wealth as possible. Two was to gain as much power as possible. And both hang on to as long as you possibly can. Well, during his rise and all of this power and this wealth and building this huge company or empire, if you will, there came a labor strike. And the labor strike came during a time when there was a lot of social turmoil between the labor and the corporation. But Andrew Carnegie did not let down. And that strike grew, and it grew, and it became violent. So violent that there was gunfights outside. There was dynamite being blown. There were trains that were lit on fire. There was attempted assassination attempts. The Pinkerton Security Department came in and started shooting randomly into the crowds. The state militia was called in. It was an all-out civil war. People were killed over that labor strike. Today, you might find it in some history book known as the Homestead Strike. This economic street fight changed Carnegie's perspective on the world. Andrew Carnegie was redeemed. He was transformed. He then began to speak about the awful things that wealth does to man. He said that in order that to amass wealth is one of the world's worst species of idolatry. In his redemption, he took action, and just as much as Bill and Melinda Gates are doing today. Andrew Carnegie spent the rest of his life giving away all of his wealth. Andrew Carnegie was redeemed. Jesus saw him for a lot more than his past, but for what he could do for God in the future. Redemption transforms us. It comes as we acknowledge and we embrace our past. And we include all of our mistakes and our hurts, our depressions, our losses, and we give it all to Jesus. We live knowing that Jesus has redeemed all of it, not some of it. And like Scrooge, we can look into our past. And yes, it may be painful at first. But in order to grow in God's grace, we have to offer him all of our pasts. And then we have to allow Jesus to work inside us, to redeem us. And then we can move forward to do what we've been given to do You know, last night I was watching a couple of football games, and there was quite a few commercials that came on. There's one about Samuel L. Jackson and a credit card. Do you know that one? He keeps asking the question, what's in your wallet? This morning I asked you, what's in your past? What's in your past that's holding you back from accepting Christ's redemption? And then let that go to Jesus. Let him redeem it and forgive it and forget about it. Christ died and was raised not to prevent us from grieving, but so that our brokenness would be redeemed. Not so that our faults would define us, or our sadness would be the end of the story. Christ died and was raised for our own personal redemption. Jesus knows all of our past faults and failures. There's nothing to hide. And yet he still invites us to this very table today. He invites us to journey with him. He invites us to remember what he did on our behalf and to connect with him in a way that doesn't mean we have to be perfect to come here. But when we come, knowing we will be redeemed. And when we leave, we will be changed.